You know, honestly, there are a lot of things to like about the Nike KD17, specifically in its performance characteristics versus the KD14s, 15s, and 16s. However, there are some glaring issues with this shoe that really can opt some people out completely. So in this video, let's give the KD17 some real-world fixes inspired by some previous KD model shoes and bring the 17s up to the level that I think we all know that the KD line can get to. Let's get into it. Now, the first part about the KD17 that I personally like a lot, but I know that is going to opt people out because people are already telling me, is this plastic exoskeleton here in the uppers. Now, I know this is a throwback to old school Nike shoes, but it actually does have quite a nice purpose because you get this nice wrap, goes all the way up into the lace line here. When you crank down the laces, you get quite a better lockdown just because there's so much substantial material. Now, that is going to irritate some people potentially with a bunion in the wrong area or just kind of a little bit more of a wide lateral foot because you actually do have this little plastic piece out here as well. Now, I've seen some colorways of the KD17 that looks like it does not have this. It's just an indent that looks like there's a plastic piece and it might just be a little bit of reinforcing. Now, that's going to cause some inconsistency along the line in terms of fit as well as performance. Now, the perfect augmentation to that can be found on the medial side or inside of the shoe. You see this little cup, this little delve right here in the shoe. Now, that correlates perfectly. I can't believe this when I took it off, but it correlates perfectly with the scythe on the KD14, the dorsal retention strap. It fits perfectly in there, which is just nuts. Now, as you can see, my strap here, just from being cranked a bunch of times and me trying to get it off, cracked here right in the middle. Now, that's a product of the fact that it is just glued and then, you know, it's being toggled back and forth all the time. Now, because there is plastic on this particular colorway of the KD17 right here, you can glue it into the midsole and then you can actually fuse it here with the plastic piece on the uppers. So if every single KD17 at least had the piece of plastic right here, maybe not going all the way up in the lace line, but at least had the plastic down here, you could fuse this dorsal retention strap here, create so much medial stability and arch support, but also lateral stability because then it crosses laterally, and no matter if you have plastic pieces or not reinforcing the lateral side of the shoe, the scythe or this dorsal retention strap would have Velcro in between them. And so number one, for people that had pain with these plastic pieces, you wouldn't have to crank them down as much. Number two, consistency across the colorways. You'd be able, this, you know, dorsal retention strap would be able to create all of that stability no matter if there is plastic coming up here into the lace line or not. But the most tangible problem with the KD17 comes in its forefoot. Now, if you look at the teardown, you see you got air strobel in the rear foot, Cushlon foam, you know, nice and comfortable, and you got a really chunky Zoom turbo unit here in the forefoot. That's all well and good. The one thing is, though, you've got what Nike calls its shank strobel in the forefoot, which is just a piece of plastic that goes all the way from the mid part of the shoe, or just slightly in front of the mid part of the shoe, which is actually important, goes all the way from there into the forefoot. So the ball of your foot is coming down on hard plastic every time you strike. Now, that is going to get pretty irritating once the removable insole starts to wear down. Now, some people will say, just throw an orthotic in there and it'll be okay, which, yeah, I mean, that could be a solution. However, it depends on your orthotic. Now, most orthotics, you know, most 99% of them, the shell ends in the midfoot because the midfoot, you know, the arch of your foot, is where you've got all those chunky, meaty muscles that like having something a little bit stiffer, a little bit more supportive under there, right? So all those muscles can handle a little bit more of that rigid support, whereas in the forefoot, where it's hard bone up there, that's where you're gonna get irritation, right? That's why you see a lot of shoes with that really nice, comfortable foam insert in the forefoot. So let me show you. If you put an orthotic in here, depending on how far the shell goes down, if it doesn't meet this shank strobel, because some of these orthotics, the shell will end right here. Now you're gonna have the ball of your foot wanting to bend right here because, you know, the arch is rigid right here, right? It's contouring the medial column of your foot. But then you've got this shank strobel underneath of it that doesn't wanna bend. That shank strobel bends right here in the midfoot, right? That's not where a shoe is supposed to bend. It's supposed to bend up here in the ball of the foot. That's where you get all the dorsiflexion. That's how you get the last phase of your gait cycle. So now you've got the natural contour of your foot wanting to bend up here, the shank strobel bending back here, and what happens? You get all that abnormal force right through the big toe joint, which is one of the most susceptible joints to arthritis. And now you're starting to get jamming at that joint. Now, if the orthotic lines up perfectly with this shank strobel, then yeah, actually it's gonna give it a solid pad to put it on, right? But it's gotta be the right orthotic, right? the one you put in your shoe might not be the right one. And so you have this huge potential for jamming of your big toe joint. Now, I understand what the shank Strobel is attempting to do, right? It's attempting to give the ball of your foot just more surface area to push down on the zoom air unit, right? Because instead of just, you know, the one part of the ball of your foot crushing into the foam, right? If you've got some abnormalities in your forefoot, anytime now you push down on that forefoot, because it's a little bit more rigid, the whole thing is pushing down and it's engaging more of the zoom air unit. That's all well and good, except for the fact that this is just intolerable for most people after a while. Now, a way to fix that would be to, number one, you've got to move the shank further into the midfoot, right? So it actually crosses a zone, so it actually provides the diving board effect and the arch support that a shank is meant to give. Now, a lot of shoes have a shank that goes into the forefoot, and they're very successful with that, namely Nike with the Alpha Flies and the Vapor Flies, as well as the Curry line shoes, right? They have the plastic shank that goes in. But what is the one similarity between both of those products? It's that the shank actually dives underneath of the foam in the forefoot, so that it's at least tolerable for a person to strike down. So if you want to make a quote-unquote shank Strobel, I actually made a little bit of a design myself. What you could do is move it back, but then have it dive under the forefoot. You can put Cushlon on top of it, or you can put a zoom air unit on top of it if you want, but then have it connect back into the forefoot of the shoe right where the tips of the toes would push down. So when you're coming through your last phase of gait, right, and your toes are the only thing that is pushing, the toes then have that landing pad to push down on, so at least they're all moving the front part of that shank in unison. And so then you are getting more of a uniform push off, you're getting more surface area to push off from, and because the toes have all that nice fatty padding on them, they're not going to get irritated as much. Then you also have the foam for the ball of the foot to interact with, and then it's not going to be, so uncomfortable. Now I know this kind of shank that I made out of cardboard here, I need to get a 3D printer, but this shank that I made here out of cardboard looks a little bit weird, almost looks like the Starship Enterprise, but I think this is the way you get plastic into the Strobel board and get that, increased surface area, that increased uniformity of push off. If you're going to do something like this, make it so that the ball of your foot, which is most susceptible to shock-induced injuries, namely stress fractures, is not getting all that abnormal wear. You're not getting that abnormal bending in the shoe, right? The shoe still is going to want to bend where it's supposed to in the ball of the foot, but it will also give you that takeoff effect like they were looking for in the shank Strobel. And honestly, the silhouette of the KD17, the shape of the outsole, really, I love. I think it's great, the design. There's so many things to like about it. It's just, a little bit in the uppers, but that shank Strobel to me is just really the thing that's going to opt the most people out. So I think if that gets maybe fixed in the 18s, something maybe a little bit different, but kind of the same, to borrow a phrase from one of my favorite YouTubers, I think that they would really have something going on there. Now, if you do want to see what I would do also to the Nike Book 1 to bring that, what I think would be up into the more elite territory and what they could do in that to really, I think, also fix their marketing with the Book 1, then make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.